Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters and friends. Welcome to another live. Today's topic is going to be one which is quite near and dear to my heart, something I've been thinking about recently, and something I think is relevant for Muslims as well as non-Muslims, both. Especially, the world that we find ourselves in, the world that we live in, the world that we're born into. Now, what I want to talk about here today with you guys, or share with you guys, is a reflection on one of the names of God that we find in Islam, which God tells us He's Al-Malik, the king, the ultimate king, the authority, the one that has dominion over everything, the one that controls, rules, overpowers, creates, dominates everything that exists. He is the only true king. Now, just before I go into the discussion today and how this relates to us overcoming the world that we live in and truly finding ourselves, let me just quickly mention here that from the Islamic perspective, or in Islam, we don't believe God is just called God. We don't even call God God. God's name is Allah. That's the name that He tells us Himself. But He also informs us that He has many names and attributes. And He has the most beautiful names and attributes, something which is not mentioned in Christianity or other faith traditions. So one of the names of God, the one I want to specifically refer to here or discuss or share with you guys here, is that He's Al-Malik, which means the king in translation. Now, something we need to appreciate about God being the king is that He is the king in the true sense, meaning that there is nothing that limits God. God has ultimate authority over everything that exists. He is a true king, unlike the kings of this world, which are limited, and their power is limited, and their power is contingent and dependent. God's power is absolute, it's perfect. He's the one that truly owns everything, maintains everything, rules everything. He is the one that has power over everything. Nothing in this existence, in its true sense, has any power, any authority. All power belongs to God. God is the one that allows for this existence to exist. God is the one that, if you like, powers this material physical existence, for it to work, for it to function, for it to exist. Now, something I want us to really think about, that if we truly understand this name of God, that He is the king, if we truly understand this and we appreciate this and we ponder and reflect upon this, it should have a profound impact on our existence as human beings. Now, something we need to focus on and reflect upon for a second is our human condition. As human beings, we are born into this reality, we're born into this world, and as we grow, we try to accustom ourselves with the world around us. We observe things, we use the blessings that we have of our senses, we see things, we smell things, we taste things, we interact with the world around us, we engage with the world around us, we engage with other human beings, other people around us. And through this engagement, through our years of growth and development, do we engage and learn about the world. We come to know the world around us. And also, through this process, we learn to define ourselves through the world. We learn to define ourselves through the perspective of others. And as we grow and we become adults, we come to know ourselves through these interactions, right? This is what makes us who we are. Our interactions with the world around us, our interaction with other people. And as human beings, by our very nature, we are beings, we are creatures that are created to be submissive and to be subservient and to submit to the Creator. It's a part of our nature, because as God tells us in the Quran, He created us to know Him and to worship Him. This is our objective. We are here to seek out our Creator and to worship Him to the best of our ability while we are alive. However, in the absence of finding our Creator, something that's done quite well through the world that we live in, because the world that we're a part of today is void of God. It's turned its face away from God. And it's turned its face towards the material, physical existence. Therefore, we find ourselves in this reality. And because of our nature, which already inclines towards submission, we end up submitting to the physical material world or something in it. We end up defining ourselves through our material possessions, especially today in the 21st century. We become materialists. Materialistic in our outlook. We define ourselves through our possessions. Our objective becomes to gain more money, gain more wealth, buy more things, buy another house. Where our life vision, our goals become material goals. We want to have a house, a family, a good job, work up the ladder, And eventually, at the end of the day, when it's all done and said, we die. This is how we end up defining ourselves, at least some of us. Others we define ourselves through ourselves. We think we're courageous and we have transcended the material by being our own gods. And this is another common mentality today in the 21st century. We like to think we know what's best. We like to do what we want to do. The sort of language that we use is, well, I do what I want to do. I don't submit to anything or anyone. I don't follow authority, especially in this postmodern world that we live in. We find ourselves in a world that's confused, and people that are confused, and through this confusion, what's emerging is this element of self-worship. People are worshipping themselves today. They're submitting to themselves today. They have become their own authority. I do what I want to do. And by saying this, like I said already, what we think we're doing is we're transcending this ephemeral material reality, but we're not. What we're doing instead is we're submitting to ourselves. We're worshipping ourselves. We have become our own gods. We have become our own creators. We think we know what's best for us and what we need to do. And this is another type of delusion that we find ourselves in. Yet there are other people who submit to other people. So there are people that submit to others. They define themselves through the opinions of others. And this is very common again today, in the times that we live in the world that we live in this godless society that we live in. Human beings, we find ourselves in a position where we have so many insecurities. Every single human being has some insecurities. Every single one of us watching this right now, including myself, we've had many insecurities. We may have overcome some, but we still have insecurities today, right? And those are our insecurities are those things that we hide and we keep to ourselves, right? But what's interesting is that people with insecurities, which is most of us, if not all of us to some degree, we find two categories of these people. One are those people who keep the insecurities to themselves and become very reclusive. They become, if you like, inward, and they lose themselves and they allow other people to define them, other people's opinions. When people say something negative to them, they take it on board and take it to heart, and it becomes their focal point. That becomes them. So other people are a mirror to them in a negative way. They let other people's opinions and thoughts of them define them. They allow other people to dictate who they are, and they live a very painful existence from this perspective. I've personally experienced this many times in my life, And again, this is something I've been thinking about, and what I'm going to share with you is how Islam allows us to transcend this. But before that, the other group of people with insecurities are those who have found a type of temporary fix, from the perspective that what they do is they overcome their insecurities by attacking others and other people's insecurities. So they exploit other people's insecurities, mock other people, bully other people, if you like. They pick on the quirks, if you like, the oddities and the strange, aspects of behavior, which all of us have, and they pick up on these insecurities that people have and they exploit them. They mock them, they abuse them, they mistreat them, and by doing so, they find a temporary relief from their own insecurities and problems. They transcend their own problems temporarily through doing this. And that's a sickness. And it's sad that people have to resort to this. And we all know, every single one of us that's watching this right now, have probably come across such people in our own lives. We're probably living with such people, have such friends that do this. And again, it's very negative and it's very unhealthy. But it's not the solution. But how do we then overcome our insecurities? How do we transcend this ephemeral realm? And the only way I want to posit here to do this is to transcend this ephemeral material physical existence from every perspective, whether it be our insecurities, whether it be materialism, whether it be, submitting to oneself. The only way to do this, my friends, brothers and sisters, is to submit yourself to your Creator. To transcend everything by submitting to the divine. When you submit yourself to Allah, to God, Al-Malik, the King, the true King, you free yourself from the slavery of all of these different things, the slavery of the opinions of other people, the slavery of your own negative opinions about yourself, the slavery of materialism, consumerism, and all of these other isms and schisms. You truly free yourself from this perspective, and you truly then discover who you are and you define yourself by your Creator, how He defines you. And at the end of the day, if we really understand and appreciate that God is the one that's the ultimate creator, the true King, the one that owns everything that exists, the one that has power over everything, and everything else in existence has no intrinsic power. It's just a tool, it's just there. And God is animating it. If we really understand this, then we should turn to our Creator and see how He's defined us. How does He refer to us? And what does God say about the human being in the Quran? How does He define us and elevate us? Something that we've lost in the 21st century, the post-enlightenment world. The world where the human being literally is defined as in the crudest sense of things, as just a rearrangement of matter. Atoms and molecules that has formed and is glued together, and we have different bunches of atoms and molecules moving around. How does God define us, which transcends this sort of material, reductionist outlook on the human being? God tells us in the Quran, وَالتِّينِ وَالزَّيْتُونِ وَطُورِ سِينٍ وَهَذَا الْبَلَدِ الْأَمِينِ لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. Where God says, indeed, after making an oath, after swearing by several different things, God says, indeed, without a shadow of a doubt, God has created you and me and every single human being on the face of this earth in the best of molds, in the best of forms. Right? This is something we need to really understand. Yes, sure. And then God says in the next verse that then they are lower, these human beings are lower to the lowest of the low. Why? Because of what we do after being created in the best of forms. But something to really understand and emphasize and internalize here is that God has created every single one of us in the best of forms. And this is a fact. This is the truth of our existence. Not the way we define ourselves or the other way other people define us. Realize and understand, if you want the true definition of who you are, it's coming from God. That He created you in the best of forms. And if we really understand and internalize this, guys, there is nothing to be insecure about. What people say, the opinions of others mean nothing. They're ash and they just blow away within seconds. It means nothing. Your opinions of yourself that are formed about yourself based on your experiences through life, again, mean nothing in the true sense of things. We're not just trying to convince ourselves to get over our insecurities here. We're going to the definition God has given us in regards to who we are. And by that definition, we are removing the layers of insecurity because they mean nothing. All of these things are insignificant. They are meaningless. The opinions of others, the way we define ourselves, the material physical existence, all of this, the way it defines us, it means nothing. God has defined us, that He created us in the best of forms. God also reminds us throughout the Quran that the human being is one of the most special creation. And the human being has the ability to transcend all other creatures as far as its connection to its Creator is concerned. Even the level of the angels. Why? Because we're beings that were created with free will, and if we exercise that free will in the right way and we use all of the faculties and abilities God has given us to find Him and to fulfill the purpose of our existence, which is what? Which is to know God and to worship Him. And we do this to the best of our ability, not being perfect. God is not looking at perfection here. He's not requiring perfection from us. What God is requiring is persistence, a sincere attempt to find Him and to connect with Him. And through doing this, we truly find ourselves in who we are. And that's something very, very significant. And if we really, in a nutshell, what I'm saying is if we really want to transcend our inferiority complexes, our negative perceptions of ourselves, our insecurities, the only true way of doing this is to find our Creator, to define ourselves through God. That's the only real way of doing this. That's the only real way of doing this. And again, that's another very extremely empowering element of Islam. Something significant about Islam that people are unaware of. And even us Muslims, we're unaware of. If we really understood these realities, and may God allow us to understand them and internalize them, if we really did, we would transcend all insecurities. We will be truly leaders for humanity. And this should be a goal that we should all aspire towards. And this is something, if we look throughout our history, some of the greatest historical figures of our history, this is something they did. They truly internalized their true reality, who they were, through God. And then they expressed this to the world, and it changed the world. It literally changed the world around us. So that's something I wanted to share with you guys today. And I guess something else I want to quickly mention before wrapping up. I want to share a quick story with you at the end, which I think is profound and summarizes all of this. But something I want to share before that is I really believe one of the reasons we really, at least Muslims, we really struggle with sincerity is because we have insecurities. I really believe insecurities lead to a lot of insincerity with Allah. And the reason I say this is because when we're insecure, when we don't know who we are, because we haven't defined ourselves in the right way through our Creator, and we haven't found ourselves, we allow other people to define us. And therefore, if we don't have a definition, we're free to be defined, right? So we therefore look for the praise of others. We look for people praising us and people saying good things about us, and this makes us feel good. We try to live in ways which is pleasing to others. It's something I did for a very long time. And alhamdulillah, thank God that I'm slowly starting to overcome this. And I have overcome this to a great degree, and I intend on continuing to overcome this. Is that when you haven't found yourself, you let the world define you, right? You do things that wins the praise of people, right? And you don't do things that you know is going to result, or maybe you think is going to result on a negative opinion of people about you. So you're not really being yourself, you know. You're just whatever. I'm just gonna, just try to act the best I can, so I hold this neutral ground where, people don't say bad things about me and people just say good things about me. And therefore, when we're doing this, we're living for others. And if we're living for others, then how are we going to live for Allah? How are we going to do things for God, sincerely for the sake of God? And this is why one of the most profound lessons, brothers and sisters, that I recently learned, I came across something by Imam Al-Ghazali. He says something profound in a book. It's a small little booklet. I recommend everyone reads it. Even non-Muslims, it's a very profound book. It's a letter to a disciple. And in this, he says something very profound. In regards to sincerity. He says, I'm just trying to remember it the best I can. He says that, look, whenever you're trying to be sincere for the sake of God, when you look at people around you, if there's people there and you're doing a public action in particular, see those people as inanimate objects. See them as inanimate objects, meaning just see them as this case or this coffee cup or something else. Don't see them as people who can make judgments, who are opinionated. See them as inanimate objects. And if you really do this, it will really help with your sincerity. And I pondered over this for a very long time because it was profound. It impacted me, but I didn't really understand why it impacted me so much. And then I think I've sort of figured out some of the wisdom behind this. And I believe one of the reasons is because, especially if you're someone that has insecurities, when you do things publicly, inevitably you're going to be doing things in a way you're trying to please people. And you're trying to avoid the displeasure of people. And when you're doing it for these reasons, you're not doing it for the sake of Allah. At least your sincerity is going to be mixed up with the opinions of others. You may be doing a little bit for Allah, but some of it's going to be for other people as well. And that's problematic, But if you start to see people as inanimate objects, meaning they're just like a stick or a stone, not in a negative way, but just in a way which will help you with your sincerity, they're just a piece of paper, or no different from these things, straight away you start to realize that their opinions aren't going to affect you anymore. Their views about you aren't going to affect you anymore. You don't care, whatever. Okay, you think good of me, you think bad of me, I don't care, whatever. Have your opinions. And if you just at least initially start to see them as inanimate objects, it would help you in doing this. What they think means nothing. I'm doing it for Allah. It'll allow you to connect with your Creator and allow you to continue to do the action, at least to the best of your ability for your Creator. It's not going to be perfect, but at least it's something you can start to do. Because at the end of the day, as human beings, we have to act. We have to act. We were created to act. What did Allah say in the Quran, in Surah Al-Mulk? He said that He created life and death to test which of us is best in deeds, in action. And for us to be there, we're in a test, and for us to be tested, we have to act. And many of our actions are going to be public actions. And our sincerity is going to be tested in those actions. So that advice is a priceless advice. And the way in the long run, the way to overcome our insecurities so we can have better sincerity with Allah is to allow ourselves to define ourselves through our Creator and not through the opinions and impressions of other people. The only way to do this is to let Allah define you, connect with Allah, overcome the opinions of others and yourselves too, and your opinions about yourself too. And I'm going to end with this story, going back to the fact that we should be servants of Al-Malik, the King, Allah, who is Al-Malik. And we should be servants only and only to Him, submitting to only Him, recognizing that He has all power and that the world around us, this ephemeral material existence that God has created and that He's placed us in, has no power, no true intrinsic power. All power belongs to Allah. And a very powerful story again from Imam Al-Ghazali, another profound story that he shares in regards to this name Al-Malik is, he says, and I'm going to paraphrase it in my own way. I'm not going to try spice it up too much, just paraphrase it in my own way. So hopefully I can get this across in very simple English. He says there was a king and there was a man. And the king said to this man, he said, look, ask me for whatever you want, I'll give it to you. Seemed to be a generous king, right? He says, ask me for whatever you want, I'll give it to you. And this man turns around and looks at him and he's like, what, how can you speak to me like this? How are you speaking to me like this when I have 2 servants which are your masters? So he's turning and saying, he's looking at the king now and he's saying to the king, well, you're going to offer me something when I have 2 servants that are your masters? And the king's now perplexed. He's like confused. He's thinking, what do you mean? I'm the king here, right? I'm the king. You're a regular person that lives, in this town, in this city. I'm being generous to you and offering you whatever you want. Just ask me. And you're turning around and you're saying to me that you have 2 servants that are my king. And the king's now intrigued. He's like, okay, who's these 2 that you're referring to? And the guy turns around and says to him, he says, greed and desire. These are 2 things that I have overcome. Greed and desire. The greed for this material physical existence and this external want that I have for the world, and desires, these internal drives. I've overcome them and I've submitted to the creator of the heavens and the earth. But you are still a slave of them. Referring to the king, he says to the king, you are still a slave of greed and desire. And for me, that was such a profound, insight. SubhanAllah, it blew my mind when I read it. Because in the true sense of things, if you really looked at what was unfolding here in regards to this story and this dynamic between the king and this regular man, in essence, the regular man was the true king from the worldly perspective because he had overcome the world and himself. But the king, the supposed king, wasn't really a king. He was just a proxy that was masquerading, for the inner self. The weak inner self, which was still a slave to its desires and a slave to the material world. So in a way, I guess one of the morals of the story is something we could take away, is that if we truly want to be kings and queens in our own right in this material world, in this temporary world, brothers and sisters and friends, which is coming to an end very soon, the 50, 60 years of life that we have, if we truly want to be kings in the limited sense, the only way we're going to be kings and queens is if we submit to the true king, Al-Malik. If we truly submit to him and free ourselves from the slavery of the material world. Now, everything I've said, guys, is something that I'm inspiring towards myself as well. Not like I've figured it out and made it. No, I'm trying to figure it out myself too. But it's something that's really driving me and inspiring me, and something we all need to, I think, do to some extent, which is to internalize, not only internalize Islam, not only claim Islam, but actualize Islam in our own lives. Actualize Islam. Islam is not just a theoretical model that we have to adopt and claim. It's a reality that we have to live. And the way to do this is to now live it and internalize it and start to try and live it to the best of our ability. And that's when Islam becomes real for us, and when it changes us, can we go out and change the world around us. But unless we do this, it's just a claim like any other claim. It's no different. Bertrand Russell in the 18th century, I think it was Bertrand Russell, David Hume, I think it was, in the 18th century, looking at the condition of the Christians during the period of the Enlightenment period, he saw, he made an observation. He said, look, these people, these Enlightenment thinkers as well, if you go to them and you ask them, do you believe God exists? They will turn around and say, yeah, I believe God exists. But if you looked at their lives and were they actually living by this truth, and the answer was no, they had given it up. So belief, the proclamation of the belief, especially as us Muslims, is not just something we utter and something that we should just say, oh, I'm a Muslim, I've grown a beard, I wear a thobe, I wear a hijab, I'm a Muslim. Okay, that's an element of your external Islam that we're displaying, or a claim that we're making. But has it become a reality for us? Has Islam manifested our existence as it's supposed to, as it did in the past? And we saw the fruits of this. And it seems like it hasn't. It hasn't for myself at least. And I don't think it has for many of us. So we don't want to be religious nihilists, if you like. Right? We don't want to be religious nihilists. We live in a time where the world needs to see the true face of Islam. It needs Islam. But it will not accept Islam Forget what negative stuff non-Muslims are saying. It will not accept Islam until it sees Islam manifesting in its true light in those that claim to be Muslim. And this is something that we need to really understand, and it's a responsibility upon us, all of us, especially those that are involved in dawah to whatever degree. So yeah, anyway, I've been ranting for very long now. I'm going to conclude it here. May God bless all of you. May God guide those that have not yet been guided. May God continue to guide those that He has guided. And let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I know I haven't been able to go through any of your comments or live comments on the screen, just because I'm using the regular live system here, so it's very hard to see your comments. And leave your comments in the comment section and I'll address them all. May God bless you. Till next time, take care.